What is good, YouTube? Quinn Wade basketball analysis coming to y'all with a quick video. We gonna talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder today and their all-star, all NBA point guard Chris Paul. And the only reason why I'm making this video is because it's an interesting conversation. Because I'm a guy that knows Chris Paul. He's a brother of mine. And it's a pretty good thing to see him have the type of season, a resilient season for him. And it was interesting because I was one of the people that coming into the season seeing like they got some talent. I like what they have, but I didn't see them being a fourth seed in the NBA Western Conference, just to be honest. But even though Chris Paul get the bulk of the credit and he really proved that in the playoffs and throughout the season, especially in the fourth quarter, which is the quarter you need to win the game. It was guys like Schroeder and Shea Gilgeous and Danilo and Steven Adams that bought into their role, but also was willing to complement each other as a unit and as a team. And you do got to give some credit to Billy Donovan for some of his lineups and some of the plays that he helped get the best out of the talent that he had. And it's just going to be interesting because a lot of people feel that they have to let Chris Paul go. And it's mainly because he's older. This is a good value for him at this point because he's still showing that he can play at an elite level, which is good. And that means he is a tradable contract. A lot of people felt like Chris Paul wasn't tradable. A lot of people felt like he was on a bad contract. And he was able to show that he still has value and he can still contribute and he can still influence winning on on multiple teams depending on who's interested in what they have to give up. Now his contract is pretty high, over $40 million. It's going to be tough to get something great back in return when you have to get all that cap space to add up to get Chris Paul. And even last year, I felt like they would have to add a piece to get off that contract um, before the season started, which did make sense at that point in time. Now, the thing about it is that I disagree with a lot of other people. I feel when I look at this roster, yes, they have a lot of veterans. Yes, they have a lot of proven players, but I don't think trading Chris Paul is the end all be all because a lot of these players' contracts are coming to an end. And I think that that's something that a lot of people forget and a lot of people ain't noticing um, within the next 2 years. So they're going to be forced to either want to continue to go strong with this lineup and team or try to rebuild on the fly and go in a different direction. Something that we've seen Boston and a few other teams, even like the Rockets, do be a competitive team, but also not be great enough to be a guaranteed playoff team or even to a higher level, a championship team. And that's basically, in my personal opinion, where they are right now because a lot of people felt like there was a borderline playoff and a borderline team that was going to be close to it. And even though they did beat the odds and they did get the job done and they gave the Rockets a run for their money, is it likely that they can repeat the same success with the same team? And even if they do, they can lose a couple of their players and they will have to rebuild and retool on the fly to make this team competitive even for the up and coming season as they have already been eliminated from the playoffs. And that's the tricky part because I said this throughout the year. They're one injury away from legitimately being out of the playoffs, possibly because of their roster and how it was constructed. So it's tougher to replicate that type of season that they had this year for next season. Plus, you add in teams like Golden State and other teams that can possibly be competing for a playoff spot, and you got to add in the draft and free agency in the trade deadline. It's going to be tougher to bring this Chris Paul team back in, have the same type of success in general, especially if you lose some pieces or you have to find other guys to fill the pieces that you lost on this particular roster once they hit free agency, once the playoffs is over. So I think trading Chris Paul isn't the answer because you have to figure out what are you going to do within the next 1 to 2 years in general with this roster, how it's currently constructed. And that has more to do with the entire team than just with Chris Paul. Now, trading Chris Paul is the big thing because people feel like he's the best player on this particular team, which is true. But at the same time, you still do have guys like Schroeder, guys like Adam, and guys like Danilo that still do have value. But not only do they have value, they can get you assets back that you can use to flip into other assets or even move up in the draft and get other guys to build around with some of the young players you have on this team. And that's going to be tricky because the Oklahoma City Thunder have so many assets already that they eventually, like we seen what Boston do with Danny Ainge, they're going to have to start flipping it into something because either you're going to have too many guys on the roster, too many guys that's trying to develop and not getting the playing time, or you're going to have a roster for the veterans that's stopping the other guys from playing, but also having to hold their career at a high level because at the same time they still want to perform because it's all about performance in this NBA environment. So if you're not performing and you're not, playing well, teams look at that and teams are watching. So the veterans still going to want their time, and the veterans still going to want to be able to get their minutes so that way they can contribute and still show what they can show to other teams that might be interested in them, whether it's via trade or free agency. So that's something that makes sense for them. So I'm basically saying that it's more than just Chris Paul this year that they're going to have to figure out. I don't think trading Chris Paul is the only thing that Sam Presti should be worried about because this whole roster is going to be basically either too old or they're going to have to pay them a central amount of money even though they're aging, or they're going to all be going to a different team and the Thunder will have to find a way to rebuild with the entire roster, including Chris Paul. So they're in a tough situation when it comes to trying to figure out what direction they should go in. I had that feeling coming into this season and throughout the season because people forget the Thunder did not get off to a great start. And a lot of people seen throughout the season, especially in the middle, that they can possibly make it. We didn't expect them to get to the top four in the West, but that's something that we've seen. So they already defied the odds this year. And like I said, it's going to be tougher to replicate it. But at the same time, it's just going to be interesting to see what Sam Presti and the owner, Clay Bennett, is going to do with this entire team within the next 1 to 2 years, as a lot of the guys' contracts will be up and they will be able to go in a different direction. Plus, some of the guys will be on aspiring contracts, so it makes them even more tradable. And on top of that, that allows them to get more assets. But what are they going to do with the assets? They got Serge Ibaka, they got James Harden, they got guys like Reggie Jackson and Cameron Payne, even other guys like was able to trade Jeff Green, who was an asset, to flip him into Kendrick Perkins. So you're gonna have those type of deals, but those are what make you within a championship team or just a team that's good, and that's where they are right now. But I want to see how Sam Presti retools and rebuild this roster within the next 2 to 3 years and try to turn them in from a good team back into what they were before. And it's going to have to do with younger players, which means this roster is going to have to get demolished and refixed within the next 5 years, if depending on how long it takes the players that they get that's young to develop and really impact winning. So it's interesting. I think people are not really looking at the whole entire context of this Thunder team and the situation that they're in currently within these next 1 to 2 years. So this picture is bigger than just trading Chris Paul. This is bigger than just trying to see what you can get for him. It's how can you continue to compete and stay competitive while also trying to find a next franchise guy, whether it's through trade if they come available, whether it's to be from the draft, and that will take several years to develop that player and add other assets that can fit around that player. If you do find a franchise guy that has proven that he can be something and will eventually become something, you still have to put the right pieces around him to be competitive, and you know how tough it is to make it to the playoffs in the West in general. So that's going to take some time too. They built Westbrook. They couldn't get out of the first round with Carmelo and Paul George, and with Paul George and Russell. And then they also could not win it all with the Harden, KD, and Russell trio. That blew up because of money and because they wasn't able to keep everybody satisfied and happy within their roles. And that ended their run because they never went to the finals again with Russ and KD. So it's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. And they're in the Western Conference. You got to add that on top. You already got teams like the Pelicans and the Suns and even teams like Sacramento that's going to be trying to compete with those spots. And then you got the contenders like the Lakers and the Clippers, the Warriors, the Blazers that's going to be trying to fight for those spots too, making it even tougher in the future to make one of those spots as those teams have a couple more years to go when it comes to making the playoffs. So Sam Presti got his work cut out for him. Chris Paul, I don't know where he's going to go. I don't know what's going to happen with him. But his contract is coming close to ending too, so he can walk and go wherever he wants to anyway if they decide not to trade him. So the Thunder, they in a franchise direction right now. Whatever they decide to do within the next 1 to 2 years is going to change the NBA. It's going to change the mentality of how you're going to go about building this team within those 2 years. So it's not about Chris Paul. It's not about Chris Paul right now. He still can play. He still has value, and he still is one of the best players in the world. But the problem with this roster is you have a lot of assets. You have a lot of veterans that have value, but they also on the brink of leaving. Not only that, you still have to find a way to either decide, do you want to continue to be good and competitive like we've seen with the Rockets and what we've seen with the Celtics the last 10 years, or will you go all the way down like we've seen teams like the Suns and the Sixers and try to rebuild through the draft? And that might be the answer, but you had to gut the roster and be bad for at least 5 years because it's just that hard to get young talent that can influence winning. So it's tough. It's crazy. But that's the organization job, and we'll see what they do, and that's going to be interesting and fun. If I'm Oklahoma City, this is going to either be the worst 5 years in the next couple years, or it's going to be bright in the last 5 years of this decade with the Thunder, just like we just seen with Seattle and Oklahoma City 12 years ago. And they had good, the bad, and the ugly, and now they back in the situation. Like I said, 1 minute you're a contender. If you don't get it done, you have to blow it up. And if you blow it up, either you're going to retool or you're going to rebuild. And that's where the Thunder are going in with this particular roster and this particular team. Other than that, check out my website, analysisplayground.com. Link in the description, comment section below. Check out my Facebook page, analysisplayground.com. Link in the description, comment section below. Like on Facebook to show support. Like this video if you liked it already. Thanks for the love and support already. If not, like and share. Share allows me to reach more people. The more people I reach, the more the channel can grow. And also, I have merchandise on my Spreadshirt, also on my Facebook page. If you want to support the brand, that's your decision, that's your choice. You can get that done by doing those two things. Other than that, I have over 1,000 videos on this channel. If you enjoyed this video, check out my older videos. If you like my older videos than this video, you can subscribe. Quinn Wade, Basketball Analysis, I'm gone. Enjoy the rest of y'all day. I'll be back tomorrow.